Part 4. Meeting with Lin Qijun. As if he was afraid that someone was chasing him, Xuan Huaifeng hurried out of Tianyan Garden. When I got to the door, I looked at the cars parked outside the garden, and looked around, and I felt as if I was alone. The anger that I had felt for no reason turned into loneliness. At this moment, I didn't even want to go back to Tongren Hall. I looked in the distance, randomly chose a direction, and walked down the street step by step. At this time, the moonlight was beginning to rise, and the neon lights of the city's pubs and restaurants illuminated the streets with colorful lights. There were also trendy Western restaurants, and gramophones played Western music from the windows. It was the young ladies and officials from the wealthy families in the city who were looking for them. A good time to have fun. As Xuan Huaifeng walked, he didn't know how he ended up on the busiest Ping'an Avenue. The busier he saw, the more deserted he felt. The sound of horns honked by cars as they passed through the street also seemed annoying. The night wind blew on my face, bringing a bit of chill. He stopped by a glass display window and subconsciously thought about tightening his collar before he remembered the long gown he was wearing today. It was a bit thin in this weather. In the store, a male clerk in a smart uniform saw him parked by the window. He thought he was a customer. He walked out to the door and invited him in with a smile. "Sir, come in and take a look. All kinds of good Western goods are ready-made. You can find them all over the city. Among foreign companies, our Da Xin company has the most complete products and the most reasonable prices." Da Xin foreign company? Xuan Huaifeng thought he had heard wrongly and was a little unconvinced. When I looked up, I saw that it was indeed the signboard of Da Xin foreign company. I couldn't help but be startled. When he came back to his senses, he had already stepped into the store. His mind was in turmoil, like a plate of silk that should be neatly sorted. Someone pulled out a few strips from the middle, while pretending to look at a half-person high-chiming clock in the store. He asked the clerk, "Is your store newly open?" The clerk replied with a smile on his face, "After hearing this question from Mr. I know that he is familiar with this place. This used to be a watch shop, but the business was not good, so we took over the place. But you don't underestimate the Da Xin sign. Although our Da Xin store is a new store in the capital, our main store has been in Guangdong for many years and has a good reputation. If you don't believe me, you can go to Guangdong and ask someday. Whoever buys imported products doesn't know Da Xin. A true child. Sir, this chime has just arrived. It is from France. Do you want to take a closer look? The price is definitely good for you. That's too bulky. Let me look at something compact." Xuan Huaifeng lowered his face, as if looking at the silver chain in the glass cabinet, and said, "Your boss is really a capable person. He has opened new stores in the capital." In order to attract business, the clerk chatted with Xuan Huaifeng diligently, took out the key to open the glass cabinet, took out a silver chain that Xuan Huaifeng was looking at, and let him take a closer look, while saying, "My boss is a capable man, young boss. He is even more capable. Our boss's business is now under the control of the Xiaodong family. Opening a new store in the capital is what he means." I don't remember those profound words about establishing a foothold in the rich land of the country, but the Xiaodong family is really smart. Do you think there are many rich people in the capital and their horizons are broad, so who wouldn't buy some high-end imported products? Your man's temperament will tell you that he knows the goods at a glance. He continued to talk, but Xuan Huaifeng was afraid that he would ask if he wanted the chain. So he quickly returned the chain to him. "The style is not that satisfactory." He hesitated whether to ask the man's current whereabouts. He pursed his lips several times, but seemed unable to open his mouth. The clerk originally thought that he looked handsome, and although he was not dressed in expensive clothes, he was not shabby either. His temperament was definitely not ordinary. He might be a customer. But now looking at Xuan Huaifeng's expression, he knew that he didn't have much money in his pocket. His face didn't look good either. He locked the silver chain back in the glass cabinet and asked Xuan Huaifeng, "Does my sir want to see anything else? We also have some cheap and affordable ones here. It's a good deal to give to your girlfriend." Xuan Huaifeng was originally hesitant to ask, but when he saw the clerk looking down on him like this, he immediately gave up his thoughts and turned around and left Daxin Foreign Company. He no longer had the intention of wandering around. He looked around and saw that the rickshaw business was booming tonight. He glanced over and saw no empty rickshaw parked on the street waiting for passengers. He simply walked back to the Tongren Hall regardless of the cold weather and thin clothes at night. The night is getting deeper and deeper, and the wind is getting colder and colder. I didn't even notice it on the brightly lit street, but when I arrived in a remote alley near Tongren Hall, the alley wind blew past me, blowing the corners of my blue robe straight up. Xuanhui shivered violently in the cold, secretly regretting that he shouldn't have saved so little money on the car. If he had just looked for it on the street, he would have gotten a car for only 30 to 50 cents. There is no point in regretting now. I can only speed up and walk towards the Tongren Hall. Finally, from a distance, I saw the lantern hanging on the door of the Tongren Hall, shining dimly in the darkness like the light on a lighthouse. In order to save electricity bills, the lights in the clubhouse were turned off at the end of the day, leaving only a dim light bulb on the door. Xuan Huaifeng saw something dark under the light in the distance. As he walked further, he saw clearly that it was a car parked in front of the guild hall, blocking the entire door. It had an air of arrogance. He couldn't help but think of Bai Xuelan. "I'm very tired now. If I bump into him again, I'm afraid I'll have to get entangled again. It's better to find a place to avoid him." Thinking of this, Xuan Huaifeng stopped and turned around. As soon as he took a step, there was a sound of wind behind his head, and suddenly a strong force surged into his back, pushing him hard against the wall. Xuan Huaifeng was startled and then turned his head. His chest was pressed hard again, and he couldn't move at all. Bai Xuelan's hateful face suddenly jumped into his eyes. He pressed the corner of his mouth slightly and said with a hearty smile, "This is my first time to fight an ambush. I didn't expect that I would succeed in the battle and catch you." Xuan Huaifeng was pressed so hard that his back was completely pressed against the cold blue brick wall. A chill penetrated through his thin robe. He was so angry that he asked, "Are you crazy?" Bai Xuelan exclaimed, "How do you say this? Let me go. Speak clearly first. What's there to say? How did I become a madman?" Bai Xuelan asked methodically, "I kindly invited you to watch the show. But you showed me how to behave. I asked you to be my adjutant, but you look like me. It's like he took advantage of you. Tell me, why did you leave so angry and without saying goodbye? Why can't I come over and ask for advice? As a result, you didn't know where you went all night, and I was afraid that something would happen to you, so I could only stay here. If I don't see anyone later, I will go to the police station to report the crime. Let me ask you, why do you think a friend like me is crazy? If you have anything to say, just tell me. Why are you moving your hands and feet?" Xuan Huaifeng grabbed his hand that was pressing on his chest. "What does it look like to let people see you?" He was not even strong enough to fight against Zhang Mama, let alone Bai Xuelan. Pulling one hand with two hands was like an ant shaking a tree. But he couldn't grab it with his nails like a woman, so he could only worry. Bai Xuelan said nonchalantly, "I don't care who sees it. Is there anyone who dares to drag me to be shot now? China is really not free. Those old feudal antiques that kill people have to be careful even when they sit down and stand up. I can hold it in for life. But foreigners are more open-minded. Especially France. They are so kind. They say whatever they like and do whatever they like. Women dare to hug and kiss them on the street. Xuan Huaifeng said, "You went to France to study. And this is all you learned?" Bai Xuelan glanced at him. His dark eyes flashed faintly, which made people feel a little heart palpitated. And he said to Xuan Huaifeng, "I have learned a lot. And I have practiced it all, so I am afraid of scaring you." With a self-deprecating smile, he relaxed his grip and let go of Xuan Huaifeng. Xuan Huaifeng moved a few steps away from the wall and stayed away from Bai Xuelan. He couldn't help but turn around and leave, making it seem like they were breaking up. After being silent for a while, he had to say, "I don't dare to take on the position of adjutant. Thank you for your kindness. Don't mention it again." Bai Xuelan was surprisingly easy to talk to and said straightforwardly, "Don't worry, I'm not a person who forces others to do things." Is there anyone in the world who forces others to become officials? I'm afraid that if I don't mention it, there's no guarantee that your brother-in-law won't mention it. Xuan Huaifeng didn't know why, but he always got angry easily towards Bai Xuelan. He pursed his lips into a straight line, and after a long while, he whispered, "You are deliberately trying to embarrass me." Bai Xuelan suddenly sighed. The two of them stood at the entrance of an unlit alley at night. When they stood a little further away, even their faces and facial features were blurred in the dimness. Xuan Huaifeng only heard Bai Xuelan sigh, but couldn't see his expression at this moment. After waiting for a while, he heard Bai Xuelan clapping his hands in midair and said as if he had made up his mind, "Okay, I know what to do. You also look down on me and want to distance yourself from me." Xuan Huaifeng said, "I don't look down on you. That means alienating me." Xuan Huaifeng remained silent. Bai Xuelan didn't expect him to be so straightforward. He acquiesced and asked with a wry smile, "What on earth did I do to make you so annoying?" "Just because I drank a little wine and borrowed your bed to lie down in the middle of the night?" Xuan Huaifeng said, "That's just the second thing." "How to say?" Xuan Huaifeng was silent again. Standing in the wind, all he could see was that the outline of the tall and beautiful body was somewhat stiff. Bai Xuelan sighed again and said, "I understand. You hate me for ruining the good thing between you and Jun." Xuan Huaifeng's voice suddenly became tight. "Don't talk nonsense. What good things can happen between me and him?" Bai Xuelan sneered. And the laughter pierced Xuan Huaifeng's cold heart. "You don't have to deny it. I only had suspicions before, but now the evidence is conclusive. If I hadn't caused you to be sent to study abroad, you might have had an affair with Jun, right? No wonder you blame me." Xuan Huaifeng was shaking with anger. His teeth were chattering, but he couldn't say a word. Bai Xuelan said, "Okay. I will follow your wishes. From now on, I am me and you are you, even if we have never met. I will naturally make arrangements for your brother-in-law. Don't worry. I will eat what I plant, that fruit." After saying that, he stamped his feet and walked towards the car. Xuan Huaifeng watched the car drive away from the front of the clubhouse like a gust of wind. In the blink of an eye, he couldn't even see the shadow. After the sound of the engine in the wind disappeared, it was as if nothing happened. He didn't know how long he stood there. When he woke up, his fisted hands were still trembling, and his legs were so weak that he had to drag his feet to move. After knocking on the door for a long time, the night watchman yawned and came out to open the door for him. When he saw his face, he sighed, "Mr. Good." Xuan Huaifeng didn't seem to hear. He returned to his small room and didn't even bother to change his clothes. He took off his shoes and lay on the bed, staring blankly with his two dark eyes. "I don't know why I closed my eyes that night, but Xuan Huaifeng felt uncomfortable all over in bed the next day. But now that the school was blowing wind of layoffs, he didn't dare to ask for leave. So he stood up from the bed. He was top-heavy and couldn't even stand. He was dizzy while holding on to the bed. "Be careful," someone suddenly shouted and came in to help him, so that he didn't fall to the ground. The man helped him sit down beside the bed. "Mr. Xuan, are you sick?" Xuan Huaifeng took a look and found out that it was Xie Chaifu who taught English in the same school as him. Although Xuan Huaifeng didn't like the excitement, Xie Chaifu and he were both residents of the Tongren Club and colleagues, so their relationship was naturally better. Xuan Huaifeng forced a smile and said, "I may have caught a cold last night." Only then did Xie Chaifu see the clothes he was wearing clearly. "Hey, why are you sleeping in a gown? Did you drink last night? I don't even look like it. Look. The gown is wrinkled." Regretfully stroking Xuan Huaifeng's gown. Xuan Huaifeng was embarrassed by his touch. He stood up and said, "It's okay. No matter how sick you are, you still have to go to class. It's not good to be late." "Mr. Xie, don't you have class today?" When Xie Chaifu saw him standing up, he was too embarrassed to sit still, so he stood up and said, "There are classes today, and I just wanted to make an appointment with you to go to school together. There is something. I want to discuss it with you." Seeing him like this, Xuan Huaifeng knew that he was borrowing money again. He frowned and asked, "Is Mrs. Sister-in-law not in good health again?" Xie Chaifu scratched the back of the chair and sighed. "I received a letter yesterday. It was written by my daughter. The words are crooked. It seems that her mother has no strength to even write a letter. This disease. Xuan Huaifeng remembered that his mother also died young, and he felt the same way. He felt sad, lowered his head and thought for a while, and said, "In this case, I will change my clothes first and go to school with you. We will talk on the way." Xie Chaifu stepped outside the house and stood waiting for Xuan Huaifeng to change into his shirt and trousers and come out. He asked with some worry, "Mr. Xuan Huaifeng?" Shook his head. Xie Chaifu also knew what he was worried about. He sighed heavily, took the lesson preparation book in his hand, held it for him, and the two of them went out together. When he was approaching the school gate, Xuan Huaifeng found a deserted place and stuffed an envelope into Xie Chaifu's hand. "I'll send this to my sister-in-law first. If the Chinese doctor can't do it, I'll grit my teeth and hire a foreign doctor. Even if the consultation fee is more expensive. If I can, it's worth treating people well." Xie Chaifu held the envelope in his hand, with a face full of shame, and murmured, "I know you are in trouble too. I have settled old debts and added new ones. I really can't help it." Xuan Huaifeng's head was filled with dizziness. He really didn't want to hear this anymore. He waved his hand and said, "Stop saying these things." Xie Chaifu burst into tears and put the envelope away. Because Xuan Huaifeng was ill, he walked slower than usual. When he arrived at school, the bell was almost ringing. The two of them said goodbye in a hurry and went to their own morning classes. The funds distributed by the Ministry of Education never arrive on time, and teachers' salaries are also inconsistent, often with IOUs. However, under this situation, the school still lays off teachers from time to time. The more people are laid off, the heavier the workload will be assigned to each teacher. Xuan Huaifeng originally taught 4 classes of mathematics, but now the number has increased to 6, and he has to stand on the teaching desk for most of the day almost every day. That's fine for normal times, but not so good when you're not in good health. He could barely hold on in the first class, but by the second class, Xuan Huaifeng felt that his vision was shaking and everything he saw was blurry. The students below also noticed that something was wrong with the young teacher. Several times Xuan Huaifeng was confused on the teaching platform, and the students sitting in the front row whispered, "Mr. Xuan? Mr. Xuan?" Xuan Huaifeng said, and then regained his consciousness from running away like a wild horse to continue teaching. But gradually he could no longer hold the textbook and had to put his hands on the teaching platform to support his body. The students couldn't stand it anymore. The monitor stood up and said, "Sir, are you sick? Can we help you to the teacher's room to have a rest?" Xuan Huaifeng was extraordinarily stubborn and forced a smile. "It's nothing serious." Before he finished speaking, his vision suddenly went dark, and he fell unconscious. Seeing that their teacher had fainted, the students were so frightened that they shouted. And some immediately ran out of the classroom to find the dean. Xie Chaifu was in English class next door. When he heard the noise, he dropped class and rushed over. He carried Xuan Huaifeng to the teacher's room with all his hands. There was a Chinese language teacher who also served as the director of the health department in the school. He had some knowledge of traditional Chinese medicine. Hearing that a teacher had fainted, he rushed over and helped Xuan Huaifeng take his pulse. He said, "It's just a cold. Young people nowadays don't do anything." Even though he was working hard, he felt dizzy and feverish all the time. It took about 2 doses of medicine to cure him. He also asked someone to find some warm water to feed the patient. Xuan Huaifeng drank some warm water and woke up in a daze. When he opened his eyes, he saw that he was surrounded by people, many of whom were students in the class. Xie Chaifu said earnestly to the side, "You were on the teaching platform just now. He fainted and shocked us. You should have listened to me and asked for a day off." The Dean of Academic Affairs was busy somewhere, so he entered the door at this time. He first looked over to see Xuan Huaifeng's condition, and then glanced left and right. "What are you looking at? Let's go back to class." The Dean of Academic Affairs lowered his face and first drove away the students who were crowding in the teacher's room to watch the fun. The part-time director of the health department was done, so he said hello and went to do his own thing. Xie Chaifu remembered that he had left a classroom of students there. And he felt guilty when he met the Dean of Academic Affairs. He gave Xuan Huaifeng a few words and walked away calmly. The teacher's room was immediately mostly emptied. Xuan Huaifeng was helped by them to lie down on the bench. It was not easy to lie down now, so he sat up and put his hands on the back of the chair to wake up. The Dean of Academic Affairs asked, "Missionary, can you bear it? Why don't you go back and take a rest first?" Xuan Huaifeng shook his head and whispered, "Just take a break. I still have a group of students in the classroom. If I go back, I will delay their class again." After fainting and waking up, he seemed to be in better spirits. He slowly stood up as he spoke. Just as he was about to go to the classroom, the academic director stopped him and said, "Missionary, wait a minute." Xuan Huaifeng turned around. The academic director said, "Since you are feeling better, please come to the office with me. I have something I want to talk to you about." Xuan Huaifeng followed him to the director's office without knowing why. The dean closed the door and asked him to sit down. He hesitated for a moment and showed a serious expression to Xuan Huaifeng. "Preacher, I invite you here because I have something to ask you about the reputation of the school. Please tell the truth and answer. What's up? Did you say anything bad to the students in class? What bad words? You have to tell the truth." The dean's face suddenly became stern. "The students' parents have already complained to the principal. They also solemnly stated that if they don't handle it, they will also complain to the Ministry of Education. Let me ask you, are you? In class, did you tell the students too much about taking off their clothes and taking a shower?" Xuanhuai's mind was not very clear due to the wind disease. After hearing this, he was stunned for a while and then asked, "What? Why did you take off your clothes and take a shower? I don't remember such a thing." The students' parents are also decent educated people and have a certain prestige in the Chinese academic community. I don't think he would make false accusations. The dean's eyes stared at his face like searchlights. He said it right. I understand very well that you say disgusting things to the students during class. His son told him everything when he got home. The lecture did not talk about mathematics. Instead, it talked about men taking a shower and stripping off their clothes and running around on the street. Xuan Huaifeng finally understood. So that's it. He misunderstood. I was just talking about Aristotle. Then you really said that? The dean's face suddenly changed. He raised his hand and seemed to hit the table with his hand to express his anger and pain. Later, considering his demeanor as a dean, he took a few breaths. He was so angry that he took his hands back and put them behind his back. Director, this is just a misunderstanding. What I said was definitely not offensive. Otherwise, please invite the parent to come and I can explain it myself. If you don't lecture well in class, talk about taking a shower. Or take off your clothes and run on the street, isn't it offensive? The dean sighed and waved his hand. Preacher, if it's something else, I'll try my best to fight for you. But this matter is related to the reputation of the school, and there is really nothing we can do. Please come back today, and someone will take the class for you. After that, he turned away. Xuan Huaifeng's confused ears seemed to be suddenly filled with loud firecrackers. He was stunned and sat quietly without saying a word for a long time. When the dean saw that he was silent, he threw his hand in the air again and said, I will ask the finance department to calculate the salary for you. Just take it today. As for packing your things, I see you are still sick. So there is no need to worry. I'll go back today and come back when I feel better. By the way, I remember that teacher Xie is from the same club as you. You can also ask him to pack your things and take them back to you. I have something else to do and I have to go to the principal. Let's go. After that, he left the office. Xuan Huaifeng sat blankly on the chair. I don't know how long it took before I remembered that I shouldn't spend time in the office. He stood up and walked slowly back to the teacher's room. The dean notified the finance department to settle Xuan Huaifeng's salary. The news spread faster than the wind in the elementary school and spread among the teachers. Several teachers who were not in class looked up and stared at Xuan Huaifeng when they saw Xuan Huaifeng coming in. Some are suspicious, some are pity, and some are glad that they are not the one who wants to leave. Xie Chaifu had just finished class when he got the news in the corridor. He was shocked. He came into the teacher's room, pulled Xuan Huaifeng aside and asked in a low voice, "What happened? They said you were fired. Isn't that true?" Xuan Huaifeng nodded. There has to be a reason, right? Xuan Huaifeng smiled bitterly and said, "It's a long story." He only said 4 words and did not continue. Xie Chaifu saw that his face was pale and he didn't even have the strength to speak. He knew that he was probably still angry because of his illness, and it would not be fun to have an attack. He sighed and advised, "Don't be anxious now, go back and have a rest. Come back when he is cured, talk to the director, maybe things can turn around." He went out to the corridor and called a student, "Go and call a rickshaw for Mr. Xuan at the school gate." He walked in again and helped Xuan Huaifeng. "Come, I will take you to the school gate. You take the car today, don't walk anymore." When we got to the door, the student actually called an empty rickshaw and was waiting there. Xie Chaifu let Xuan Huaifeng get into the car. He stood on the ground and said to Xuan Huaifeng with his head slightly raised, "The hall is deserted, and the guys don't know how to wait on people. Don't you have a sister here who has a nice environment? Why don't you get a rickshaw handlebar? What's the address where you're taking her?" Xuan Huaifeng immediately shook his heavy head vigorously. After what happened yesterday, now that I have been staying at home for the past year, I am afraid that not only will I not be able to rest, but I will also have another layer of worries. If Nian Liangfu cannot get the position of director of the customs department, how can he be let go? He will definitely be forced to socialize with Bai Xuelan. Since Xuan Huaifeng refused, Xie Chaifu had no choice but to force himself. He ordered the rickshaw driver to go to the Tongren Guild Hall and lowered the fare by a dime. Then he took a step back and watched the rickshaw drive away. Xuan Huaifeng was sitting in the car. The rickshaw was shaking, making him feel uncomfortable all over. He was suffering with his eyes closed when the wheel seemed to hit a stone, and the whole rickshaw jerked suddenly. Xuan Huaifeng let out a sigh of relief. The rickshaw driver heard a noise behind him. He continued to pull forward and said in a rough voice, "I'm sorry, sir. The roads in this area are poorly paved and there are gravels everywhere. It's a bit bumpy. If Ping'an Avenue has good asphalt like that, the car will run much smoother." When Xuan Huaifeng heard the words, Ping'an Avenue, he couldn't help but open his eyes a little. Daxin Foreign Company. He felt suddenly cold and hot, making him feel unspeakably uncomfortable. This feeling of discomfort was mixed with a bit of panic of not knowing where to go. Suddenly all the pain was evoked by a few casual words of the coachman. I could neither go to my sister's place nor wanted to go back to the club. He is actually a person who does not have his own home. Coachman. Xuan Huaifeng moved his lips slightly. I'm not going to the Tongren Hall. Let's go to Ping'an Avenue and start a big business. The rickshaw took him to Daxin Foreign Company. Xuan Huaifeng got off the car and gave him money. He raised his head to see the Daxin Foreign Company's signboard. As soon as he raised his neck, he felt a pain in his head. It was very heavy, as if he was wearing an iron hat. He had to stretch out a hand to hold the gold-plated door of the foreign company, and stood quietly, waiting for the dizziness to pass. After standing for a while, Xuan Huaifeng couldn't help but lift his lips and smile weakly. When we were in the car, I couldn't wait to come over. It seemed that everything was settled when we got here. But what did he come here for? He looked so down and out, even he couldn't bear to look at it. So why did he come here to embarrass himself? With this thought in mind, he slowly turned around, put his hands on the wall to support his body, and moved bit by bit to leave. Before he passed the clean glass display window of Daxin Foreign Store, there was a sudden squeak and a car stopped right next to Xuan Huaifeng, facing the entrance of the foreign store. The driver opened the door, and the two men got out of the car one after another and walked towards the foreign store. Xuan Huaifeng only glanced at them and immediately turned his face to one side, hiding half of his body. The man in front didn't pay attention and walked straight in. However, the man behind saw Xuan Huaifeng as soon as he got out of the car. He almost ran to him, hugged him and asked, "Why are you here? You look so bad, you are still sick. Wandering around in the street?" It's Bai Xuelan, who is dressed very fashionably and elegantly. Xuan Huaifeng's knees were already weak at this time. Bai Xuelan hugged and pulled him, and suddenly he fell on Bai Xuelan, which frightened Bai Xuelan into a cold sweat and shouted, Hey, hey! What can you say? Stop! You scare people!" At the same time, he hurriedly picked up Xuan Huaifeng. The man who got off the car with him was about to step in when he heard Bai Xuelan's voice and ran back quickly. "What? Is this your friend? Is he suddenly ill?" He looked over and took a look. He was caught off guard and was shocked. He lost his voice and said, "Why is it, Huaifeng? What happened?" As he spoke, he reached out his hand and anxiously stroked Xuan Huaifeng's sweat-covered forehead. "Huaifeng, can you hear me? I'm Qijun. We'll take you to the hospital right now." Xuan Huaifeng originally had his head tilted to one side, but now he had the strength to turn his head outward, as if he had taken some magic medicine, and whispered, "Qijun. Qijun." Lin Qijun immediately responded, "I'm here, Huaifeng. Don't be afraid, I'm here." "Qijun." Xuan Huaifeng breathed a few times and said in a low voice, "You hold me. I don't want anyone else to hold you." Bai Xuelan's face changed, and his fingers were hooked like eagle talons. Although Lin Qijun felt that it hurt Bai Xuelan's face, now was not the time to care about his classmate's face, so he whispered to Bai Xuelan, "He is seriously ill and talking nonsense." As he spoke, he reached out his hand to take Xuan Huaifeng into his arms, lowered his head and said, "Don't be afraid. I will take you to see a doctor." He carried Xuan Huaifeng into the car and told the driver to drive to Jishan Hospital immediately. Bai Xuelan stood there without getting in the car. Watching the car drive away, his eyes almost started to bleed. Xuan Huaifeng felt extremely at ease in Qijun's arms and no longer wanted to support him, so he fell asleep in the car.